Get out of the way, old geezer. Just disappear.
Huh? My younger female boss, Manager Laura, shouted loudly as we entered the conference room. I was accompanying Laura that day for a deal worth over $100 million with a world-renowned company. Startled by her sudden outburst, I froze, but she quickly followed up with another harsh comment, further rattling me.
We don't need you here for the deal to succeed, so just go home already.
At that point, I had no choice but to comply. Laura has always been the type of woman brimming with confidence, acting without any regard for those around her. She probably thinks she's the most important person in the room. However, little did she know that a surprising turn of events was about to make her reconsider that attitude. My name is Frank, and I'm 61 years old. I currently live happily with my wife, Susan, who is 5 years younger than me. Our 3 children are all grown up and have moved out of the house. Now that it's just the 2 of us, the house has become much quieter. But when I was younger, I was so absorbed in my work that I couldn't spend much time with Susan. So now we're making up for lost time and enjoying our time together. I retired once when I turned 60, but with the cost of living continuously rising, I decided to go back to work as a contract employee. Susan said to me,
"You're over 60 now, so don't push yourself too hard. I can work, and you can stay at home if you want."
But I couldn't just rely on Susan like that. She had taken care of all the housework and raised our 3 children by herself while I was busy with work. Even though I couldn't help at all, she never complained. So there was no way I could make her work now. The kids are all grown up, and Susan finally has some free time to herself. I absolutely didn't want to take that away from her. And as if by perfect timing, the company I've worked at for so long, Morgan Corporation, was looking for contract employees, so I decided to apply. To my luck, they offered to rehire me. And so, the day of my first shift as a contract employee arrived. Even though it's the company I've worked at for years, I was incredibly nervous. I used to work in the accounting department, spending my days with calculators and computers, but this time, I was assigned to the sales department. I had done some sales work when I was younger, but that was ages ago. I was filled with anxiety about whether I could handle sales. Seeing my anxiety, Susan prepared a special lunch for me as always.
"Today, I packed all your favorite things. Eat this and do your best at work."
She handed me the lunch with a big smile. I couldn't help but be overjoyed. Susan's lunches are delicious, and I absolutely love them. When I retired, the thought of never eating one of her homemade lunches again made me sad. So, being able to eat one again like this made me incredibly happy. "Thank you, well, I'm off," I said, and Susan saw me off until I was out of sight. And so, with a heart full of both anticipation and anxiety, I headed to the company. When I arrived at the office and walked in, I was surprised by how different it was from the accounting department I used to work in. The accounting department had a calm and peaceful atmosphere, but the sales department felt tense, and all the employees seemed exhausted. Nervously, I started looking for the department head. Since I hadn't had much interaction with the sales department, I didn't know who the department head was, so I glanced around, trying to find someone who seemed like the boss. Then, suddenly, a woman's loud voice came from behind me.
Hey, you're in the way. Move already.
Startled, I quickly turned to look at the woman. She looked at least 20 years younger than me, but her attitude was clearly overbearing. Sorry. I quickly stepped aside, but she glared at me. Then, staring directly at my face, she said something surprising.
Are you the new contract employee, Frank, starting today? If so, I'm really not happy about it.
She said this as she crossed her arms. I couldn't understand why she disliked me so much, but when I realized this woman was Laura, the department head who would be my boss from today, my anxiety only grew. Yes, I'm Frank. I used to work in accounting, so I'm good at preparing documents. I'll do my best, so I appreciate your guidance. When I said that, Laura let out a big sigh. Then, while looking at the other employees who had been watching, she said something unbelievable.
Don't ask me for help. There's no way I'm taking care of some old geezer. James, you do it. You two old geezers are perfect for each other.
Laura pointed to James, who was sitting at a nearby desk. James seemed to be in his early 50s and looked like a nice guy. Despite looking a bit puzzled, James stood up and approached me.
Frank, my name is James. The desk next to mine is available, so please use it.
James, who had been scolded by Laura, led me to the desk with an air of uncertainty. Seeing this, Laura began to talk at me rapidly.
Since you obviously can't do sales, just make sure you assist the other employees properly. If you mess up, you're fired. Seriously, why did HR stick us with this old geezer?
Laura stormed back to her desk in anger. Fired if I make a mistake. I had worked in the accounting department for many years, but this was the first time anyone had ever said something like that to me. Laura's words, which felt like a threat, made me feel angry. Then, James quietly told me about Laura.
Laura is the youngest person to ever be promoted to department head in this company. She graduated from Harvard University, which is considered one of the most challenging schools, and she's apparently highly regarded by upper management. Her work is flawless, no matter who you ask, but she's really tough on anyone below her. She doesn't go easy on new employees, so you should be careful too, Frank.
James said this in a whisper, so no one else could hear. I see. Laura acts high and mighty because she's considered an elite employee. That's what I thought. While I was a bit irritated by Laura, I didn't have time to dwell on it. I needed to learn the sales department's work as quickly as possible. And I have to make sure Laura has no complaints. I focused on getting to work and tried not to think about Laura. Then, after a while, Laura came over to my desk again.
Here, these are the materials for tomorrow's sales meeting. Organize them and submit them to me by the end of the day.
Laura said this and handed me a huge stack of documents. I had never prepared sales materials before, so I was at a loss, but I started working on them anyway. Seeing this, James kindly offered to teach me how to put them together from scratch. Since I was good with computer work, thanks to James's help, I was able to complete the materials quickly.
As expected of you, Frank, accounting does involve a lot of computer work. After all, I should take a page out of your book.
James praised me, but Laura was different. When I handed the completed materials to Laura, she began reviewing them. After finishing her review, She dismissed me with a wave of her hand without saying a word. No matter how high up she is, when someone does work for you, you should at least say something. I couldn't understand why Laura acted so high and mighty in her work. Without saying anything, I glanced at Laura and returned to my desk to start another task, but the gloom in my heart remained. After a while, the long-awaited lunch break finally arrived. I opened the homemade lunch that Susan had prepared for me at my desk. Inside, just as she had said this morning, it was packed with all my favorite dishes. Susan's kindness warmed my tired heart. As I was getting emotional, James saw my lunch and exclaimed in admiration,
Is that homemade? That's nice.
As he said this, James started eating the sandwiches he had bought from the corner store. Then we started chatting about random things. Through our conversation, I realized that James was only 3 years younger than me and was quite friendly. The topic eventually shifted to Laura. James's expression turned grim.
Since Laura took over as department head, the atmosphere in this department has completely changed. It used to be a really bright and fun place to work.
Is that so? Now, it's nothing like that. The air is tense and heavy. When I said that, James let out a sigh.
It's all because of Laura. She might be good at her job, but she doesn't care one bit about her subordinates' feelings. Since she became department head, several employees have left. With that attitude, it's no wonder people are quitting.
James gave a bitter smile. I see. I nodded, and James finished the tea he had in front of him.
Well, I can quit even if I want to.
Huh? Seeing my puzzled look, James started talking about his family situation. As it turns out, James lives with his wife, who is ill and needs to go to the hospital every day. James accompanies her to the hospital every day. On top of that, since the medical bills are out of pocket, if James doesn't work, they won't be able to afford the hospital visits. That's why James has to keep working, whether he likes it or not. That's tough. That was all I could say. We continued talking, and before we knew it, our lunch break was over. As we hurried to clean up our lunch boxes, Laura came over and ordered us to prepare a large amount of paperwork.
Here, get this done by the end of the day.
Laura, with her haughty attitude, leaned back in her chair. James and I exchanged glances. The workload was so large that it seemed impossible for the two of us to finish it in a single day. But we decided to get started without saying a word. We knew all too well what would happen if we argued. Before I knew it, the clock had passed quitting time. James, sitting at the desk next to me, started to look anxious as he glanced at the clock. He probably needed to take his wife to the hospital soon. Without hesitation, I said, "I'll take care of the rest, James. You should go and take your wife to the hospital." James thanked me profusely before leaving. After that, I worked overtime and finished all the tasks before heading home. The exhaustion I felt was nothing compared to what I had experienced in the accounting department. And then, the incident happened the next day. When I arrived at work as usual, I noticed Laura looking furious. Puzzled, I put my things down at my desk. Suddenly, with a face like a demon, Laura stormed over to my desk.
Who prepared this document?
She shouted and threw the document she was holding at me. I recognized it immediately. This was the document that James had prepared yesterday. I hadn't created it, but since James and I were working on the same task, I figured I could fix any mistakes. So I took the document in hand and said, "It was me. I'm sorry. Is there something wrong?" Laura glared at me and yelled,
The numbers are wrong. I almost went into the meeting with this. This is why I hate working with old people.
"I'm terribly sorry." All I could do was apologize repeatedly.
Fix this document immediately. Hurry.
Laura's anger wasn't calming down. In fact, it was getting worse, echoing through the office. The other colleagues started looking over to see what was going on. Just then, James arrived at work. He glanced at the document in my hand and looked shocked.
That document.
I quickly signaled James with my eyes, but he couldn't stay silent.
I'm the one who prepared it.
James said this to Laura.
What? So Frank tried to cover for you? What is this? Some kind of friendship game? I don't care, just redo it quickly. I don't want to see any old geezer's camaraderie around here. James, if you don't fix this in 10 minutes, you'll get fired.
What?
The office fell silent, and everyone was staring at Laura. James, eyes wide, sat down at his desk and began fixing the document as he was told. But even just correcting it in 10 minutes was nearly impossible. I wanted to help, but Laura's intimidating gaze made it impossible. My colleagues and I watched James in tense silence. Then, 10 minutes passed. James wasn't finished yet. Laura approached him and shouted loudly,
Time's up. You're fired, effective today. Goodbye.
I couldn't take Laura's sarcastic words any longer. Wait a minute, please give James just one more chance. There's no way anyone could finish this in 10 minutes. I pleaded, but Laura just sneered at me.
Work is something that should be done right the first time. You only get one chance. Plus, what the boss says is absolute. So, James, you're done here. Now hurry up and pack your things.
James quietly began to gather his belongings. At this rate, James was really going to leave. Eventually, James picked up his things and left the office. The office was in an uproar. I desperately ran after James. James, wait, please. I called out loudly to James, and he stopped. He looked at me with a bitter smile.
I always thought this day would come, but I didn't expect it to be now. I'll be fine. You keep doing your best, Frank.
James seemed resigned. If we report this to someone above Laura, I'm sure they'll reverse the decision to fire you. Let's try, okay? Even though I tried to persuade him, James refused to return to the office. He placed a hand on my shoulder.
I've already reached my limit working in a company with someone like her. This was just a good opportunity to leave. Frank, don't push yourself too hard. Let's catch up and have some fun somewhere else later.
With those words, James walked out of the company. I was left feeling utterly helpless. What would happen to James and his sick wife now? When I returned to the office, everyone had resumed their work as if nothing had happened. From that day on, I spent every day in the office, feeling lonely without James and enduring Laura's constant sarcasm. This continued for about a year. Then, one day, Laura called me over. When she calls me, It's usually because I've made a mistake or she wants to pick a fight. I headed to her desk with a sense of dread. As soon as Laura saw me, she let out a big sigh.
I really don't want to ask someone as old as you, but there's a lot of stuff to carry, so I need you to come with me to a business meeting this afternoon. The client is that Klein Corporation. This deal is worth over $100 million, the biggest in the company's history. Failure is not an option.
My eyes widened. Klein Corporation is a globally renowned company. Okay, I responded, but having never accompanied anyone on a sales call before, I was filled with anxiety at the thought of being involved in such a significant deal. Before I knew it, the lunch break was over, and I started preparing for the meeting. Then Laura called out to me.
Come on, let's go. You're in charge of carrying the bags. Here, take this.
Laura handed me a bag filled with a large amount of documents. The bag was heavy. I carried the bag and followed Laura. Klein Corporation was in the next town over, so Laura and I had to take several trains to get there. During the journey, Laura didn't say a word to me, even though I was struggling with a heavy bag, and she walked briskly ahead on her own. Finally, we arrived at Klein Corporation and entered the entrance hall. As expected of a major corporation, the interior was so pristine, like a luxury hotel, that I found myself questioning whether this was really a company. After a while, a female receptionist guided Laura and me to the meeting room and told us to wait for the person in charge. It was my first business meeting, and I could feel my heart pounding. As soon as we entered the meeting room, Laura turned to me and uttered a shocking statement.
All these documents are for Klein Corporation, so I can go home light-handed. That means you're not needed anymore. Get out of here, old geezer. Disappear.
Well, you mean, go home. Laura's voice echoed through the meeting room. Startled by Laura's sudden outburst, I was frozen in place. Was I really just a bag carrier? I was both stunned and a little irritated. But then, Laura hit me with another verbal blow.
The meeting will go just fine without you, so hurry up and leave. You're just in the way.
There was nothing I could do after being told that. Laura was always the type of woman who acted with confidence, disregarding those around her. She probably thought she was the most important person in the room. I was already fed up with Laura. As I stood up and prepared to leave the meeting room, a loud voice came from the entrance. The voice was shaking with anger.
What are you talking about? There's no way Frank is in the way. Take back what you just said. If you don't, it'll be you who disappears.
Kevin, how do you know Frank's name?
The man who entered from the entrance was Kevin, the CEO of Klein Corporation. Laura was clearly rattled, unable to understand what Kevin was saying to her.
You have no idea, do you?
With all due respect, this old man, Frank, is just a contract employee at our company. He came along today as a bag carrier. Having him in the meeting would just be a hindrance, so I was going to send him back to the office.
When Laura said this, Kevin let out a big sigh.
I'd heard rumors about you, but you're even more of a monster manager than I expected. Your treatment of your subordinates is terrible. And to think you'd even treat Frank like that. Unbelievable.
What?
Laura was growing more confused.
I don't quite understand what you mean.
Kevin cleared his throat loudly and then said something shocking.
I'd like to cancel this deal. I can see this going well with a company that treats its employees so poorly.
Laura's face turned pale.
What are you saying? I've never treated my subordinates poorly. That's completely untrue.
I was appalled by Laura's words. How could she even say that? Kevin seemed to share my sentiment as he looked at Laura with suspicion.
I knew this would be the outcome before even starting this deal.
Why?
Someone had informed me that there's a manager in your sales department who fires subordinates on a whim. Klein Corporation doesn't do business with companies like that.
Who told you such lies, Kevin?
As Laura said this, a figure appeared at the entrance of the meeting room. Laura was so shocked by the sight of this person that she looked like she might faint.
I was the one who informed Kevin, and I didn't lie about anything. Everything I said was true, wasn't it?
What are you doing here?
Yes, standing at the entrance was none other than James, who had been fired from the company. I wasn't surprised to see him at Klein Corporation, but Laura's eyes were wide open in disbelief. Hearing Laura's words, Kevin raised his voice.
Do you have any idea who you're talking to? James is not someone you can speak to that way.
What do you mean?
Laura still didn't understand what was happening. Then James handed Laura a business card and began to introduce himself.
I apologize for the late introduction. I am the chairman of Klein Corporation.
What? You're the chairman of this company.
Laura stared at the business card and then at James repeatedly. Then she suddenly started laughing.
No way, that's impossible. You must be joking, right?
Even at this point, Laura refused to acknowledge that James was the chairman. Kevin, witnessing this, erupted in anger.
Hey, enough of this nonsense. James is the grandson of David Brown, the founder of this company. If you don't believe it, look it up yourself.
Finally, it seemed Laura began to recognize who James was, and she fell silent.
I am sorry, but there is no way our company will do business with yours. Now apologize to Frank for your harsh treatment of him.
James glared at Laura as he said this. It was clear from his tone that James, usually mild-mannered, was genuinely angry. However, Laura still refused to apologize to me. Instead, she glared at me.
This failed $100 million deal is all your fault. If you hadn't been here, the deal might have gone through smoothly. You're nothing but bad luck. I should never have brought you along.
Unbelievably, she was now trying to blame me for her own failure. The deal fell through not because of me, but because of Laura's attitude. Kevin seemed too stunned to say anything. Then, in a voice louder than I had ever heard from him, James spoke up.
Laura, it seems you still don't understand your position. Frank is going to be your superior. So, that's something I can just ignore.
What? That's impossible. I graduated from a prestigious university and am a department head. There's no way this old man could outrank me.
As Laura said this, Kevin began to reveal the truth.
Frank is officially set to become the executive vice president of this company starting next month.
What? The executive vice president of this company? This old geezer.
Laura looked at me with a face like she had just been hit by a ton of bricks.
I am the one who brought Frank to this company. I believed his talents would be better utilized here than working with someone like you.
No way.
Laura's expression was one of disbelief. The truth was, when James left the office, I had been worried and asked him what he planned to do next, and he had shared something astonishing with me. It turns out that James is the grandson of the founder of Klein Corporation. He had been groomed from a young age to take over the company, but he disliked following the path set out by his parents, so he had been working at Morgan Corporation instead. However, after being fired from Morgan Corporation, he said he had no choice but to step up. 6 months after James left the company, I met up with him for a drink. During that time, James told me that he had taken over as the chairman of Klein Corporation, following in his grandfather's footsteps. He was happy because becoming chairman gave him more free time, allowing him to spend more time with his wife. Then, seeing how I was struggling with Laura's tyrannical behavior, James invited me to work with him. It just so happened that the position of executive vice president at Klein Corporation had recently become vacant due to retirement. When I hesitated, James persuaded me, and I decided to join Klein Corporation. I had just finished writing my resignation letter and was about to submit it when today's events unfolded.
What talent? What do you mean?
Frank graduated from the mathematics department at the prestigious Cambridge University abroad, is fluent in multiple languages, and is incredibly sharp. That's probably why your company hired him so quickly as a contract employee.
Cambridge University. That's one of the world's most prestigious universities.
Hearing this, Laura fell silent. Yes, I graduated from Cambridge University abroad. Cambridge University is famous for its mathematics program and is consistently ranked as the top university in the world. I had always loved math, so I worked hard to get into that university. When my dream came true, I was able to attend Cambridge University. Studying at an overseas university also made me fluent in multiple languages. However, unlike Laura, I never flaunted my academic achievements. I believed there was no point in doing so. There's someone else who shares my perspective. James graduated at the top of his class from Harvard University. When I said this, Laura staggered back in shock.
Harvard University. That's where I graduated. So James was at my university, and he graduated at the top of his class. No way.
James gave a wry smile at Laura's words.
That was a long time ago.
Kevin, who had been silently observing, burst into laughter.
A talented hawk hides its claws. It seems the old men you look down on are actually far more capable than you.
Laura looked as if the world was ending. Kevin, in a stern tone, delivered a final blow.
Frankly, your behavior today has been unacceptable. I can't ignore the fact that your subordinates are suffering because of you. I'll be informing the president of Morgan Corporation about what happened today. Don't think you'll get off lightly.
Laura's eyes widened in shock.
What? It's okay, I'll tell the president myself.
I doubt you'll tell the whole truth. I'll handle it.
Ugh.
Laura collapsed to her knees and didn't move for a while. Even after returning to the office, she remained in the same state, as if her soul had left her body. It was karma for all the subordinates she had mistreated over the years. No one offered any kind words to Laura. After that, Kevin exposed Laura's true nature to the president of Morgan Corporation. He also informed the president that Klein Corporation would no longer be doing business with them because of Laura. In Gerd, the president of Morgan Corporation demoted Laura and announced her transfer. Upon hearing this news, Laura chose to resign before the transfer could take place. Her pride likely wouldn't allow her to accept such a reality. It's rumored that she has since returned to a rural hometown to help with the family business. People are often not what they appear to be. I hope that from now on, she will learn to judge others not by their appearance or academic background, but by what's inside. As for me, I left Morgan Corporation and started working as the executive vice president at Klein Corporation. I've become good friends with Kevin and James, and I enjoy my work every day. Rumor has it that the atmosphere in the sales department at Morgan Corporation has brightened considerably since Laura's departure. The attitude of those in leadership positions can greatly influence a company's environment, for better or worse. I've made a vow to continue striving to be the kind of person who earns the respect of my subordinates.